Okay, up next, Mr. Len Jessup. I know, do any of you know Len? Probably some of you know Len. Len can tell you his story, I think, better than I can. I don't think I know he can. Former UNLV president, and he's done much, much more than that. He is currently a principal of a new venture fund that's focused on investing in Las Vegas Valley-based startup businesses, Desert Forge Ventures. So, Len Jessup, everyone give a round of applause for Len Jessup, please. Thank you, Len.
Thank you, Lorraine. And thank you, Earl. I got several useful lessons there. I don't know that I have Earl's energy or charisma. I'm going to try. But thanks. And I'll just do a little bit of kind of warm up and introduction, and then that way I'll let some of the people come back in the room. And then the main things Lorraine wanted me to talk about was the fund. Why did we create this venture capital fund aimed at things in Las Vegas? What's the structure? What are we looking for? And then specifically, she wanted me to talk about what we're looking for in terms of founders. And so that's kind of the general agenda. As Lorraine said, so it was about 11 or 12 years to the day when I first got to Las Vegas, at least to live here full time and work at UNLV. Before that, just a quick summary is long-time career in higher ed as a business school faculty member in information systems and in entrepreneurship. And then that eventually led into administrative stuff, business school dean a couple times, and then kind of led me here to Las Vegas to be president at UNLV. I did a term here at UNLV about 4 years, and then went down and ran one of the little Claremont colleges in Southern California for about 6 years. And then this last summer I retired and figured it was kind of capped off that part of my life, retired from my higher ed part of my career, and then moved back up full time. We kept our home here in Henderson, my wife Christy and I, and so kind of then transitioned back up here full time, and I've been here now for about 10, 11 months again, working on the fund and building it and working with UNLV and creating the corporations and the banking and everything that goes into creating a fund. And then about 2 months ago got into began in earnest fundraising for the fund. So anyway, that's kind of a quick summary of what got me to this point. So let me begin with a little bit of a story. So at University of Arizona, and I grew up in California, but I went to graduate school at University of Arizona, the business school there. Went there to work on my PhD in business. And when I was there at the business school, there was the local company that hired most of the grads out of the business school, and quite frankly, probably at least out of the engineering college and maybe many other parts of the university. Who do you think that might have been? This was kind of late 80s. The company hiring most of the grads locally was Raytheon, not a big surprise, and still one of the biggest employers in Tucson. And then fast forward like 22 or 23 years later, I got recruited to go back to University of Arizona, my alma mater, to be the business school of the dean that I went to. The first thing that goes through your head is, did they check my transcripts? Do they know what kind of a student I was? It's kind of a shock that I got asked to come back. But I went back to be the business school dean. Things had turned around. The university really started a crank on tech transfer and commercialization and spinning out companies. And so when I went back, and then that would have been, this is now maybe kind of when I went back 11 years, 12 years, like 15 years ago, back to Tucson, that the local company hiring most of the grads was not Raytheon anymore. And it wasn't because Raytheon had necessarily stopped hiring as many people, but the local company hiring most of the grads, certainly out of the business school, was a spin out from the university. And Ventana Medical Systems, cancer diagnostics company. And I'm back there, and I'm then getting to know this company and the CEO, and we had a great relationship with them, given that all the grads they were hiring. But I love that it was something coming out of the university that had grown and gotten so big, throwing out lots of revenue into the community, incredible jobs all through all the different sectors. Just an incredible example of what a research university can really do when it gets cranking. And what I loved even more about it was when their exit or their liquidity event happened, it wasn't like Ventana Medical Systems left and went away. It was bought by Roche, and it's still there, and it's now Roche Tissue Diagnostics in Tucson, and it continues to go. And Roche throws a lot of its diagnostics into Tucson and runs them through that operation there. And I love that. So when I came up here from there up to UNLV, that shaped my thinking about how to think about UNLV from a kind of through an economic development lens. And it really, it fueled the fire that we had, the fire in the belly to want UNLV to be a Carnegie R1 research institution. So that it would become an idea factory like that, cranking out inventions that would spin out into the community. And that was kind of the goal when I got here 11, 12 years ago. So returning, then I picked up on that thread, working with Zach Miles, who now runs the Office of Economic Development there, and Bo and Jamie and a bunch of others on the team there. We picked up the thread of that again. We knew that one day we were going to need to develop a venture capital fund aimed at the university. But at that point, the university wasn't ready. It wasn't yet a Carnegie R1. It is now. And quite frankly, the community kind of wasn't ready at that point quite yet. But it's ready now. The university's now an R1, cranking out stuff. And the Las Vegas startup ecosystem has heated up. This is a good example of it. What Lorraine is doing with Tech Alley, consistently drawing the crowds and the engagement, the interest that you're doing. It's a good example of what's going on in the community. I pulled data from Deal Room and a few other sources with the help of the team at the Lindsay Institute. And we're about to come out with a study on the startup ecosystem. It'll be out in about a week or two. And the punchline, you don't have to read the long report. The punchline is it justified my hunch that the startup ecosystem had cranked up here in town in the last 10 or 15 years. In fact, by the Deal Room data, over the last couple of years, the Las Vegas startup ecosystem, in their ranking by data of all the cities in the United States, where do you think Las Vegas ranked? Not by volume, but by activity, startup activity and investment. Las Vegas, around all the cities in the country, ranked in the top 5. In the top 5. And then a different survey, Crunchbase Capital Advisors, did their own ranking, kind of similar data. And in their ranking, when you pulled out the big hubs of innovation in the Bay Area and Boston and Los Angeles, you pulled out all the big ones. Where did UNLV come out in that? Of all the other cities left, again, not by volume, but by year-over-year percentage growth and activity, it ranked number 1. When you took out all the other big innovation hubs, Las Vegas was number 1 ahead of Austin in terms of year-over-year growth. So this ecosystem is heating up. That's all featured in our report. And then the other thing we found was that while it's evolved and there's pretty good pre-seed capital and some smaller seed funds available with Angel NV and a few others, and there's great events like this happening now in the ecosystem, and there are some incubators and accelerators in town that sort of front part of the ecosystem has gotten really good, but Las Vegas still lacks deep local organized capital. There's a lot of money in town, and it's starting to kind of find its way into ventures, but not in an organized way like that you would find in a kind of a more formal and mature innovation hub. So that then kind of convinced us that it was time to launch the fund. So Desert Forge Ventures is the fund that we've launched. I worked through the fall. I got back last summer. I worked through the fall working with the university on what the relationship would be like with UNLV, what the structure of the fund ought to look like. Ballard Spahr, the local office of Ballard Spahr, helped us with the formation and all the documents and the structure of everything. Then around January, February, we created the corporations. We're banking with JP Morgan Chase, the local office. We're using Carta for all of our fund administration, so all the investor relations. And about 2 months ago, I started in earnest with the fundraising for the fund. The Fund 1, I'm modeling everything after my experiences at University of Arizona. They did Fund 1, right after I left U of A. As dean there, I helped to create Tech Launch Arizona, the tech transfer team, which is now doing really well. And then right after I left, they launched Fund 1, maybe 11 years ago, $5 million fund. Then quickly they went into Fund 2 at $25 million, and then they're now raising money simultaneously for 2 funds, a sort of defense-related fund and then a fund for everything but defense in Tucson, and raising $100 million across those 2 funds. So we modeled everything after the U of A experience. I see my teammate Christelle just walked in, thanks. And so for our Fund 1, our goal is that I've got $10 million committed from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. They're going to match dollar for dollar anything we do in 2 tranches of $5 million and then another $5 million. They're pulling it out of SSBCI funds, the State Small Business Credit Initiative. The money's there. And then, so our goal is to raise $10 million for this first fund so that we can then pull everything, maximize the match that we're getting from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So the goal for our Fund 1, and then our plan is to do Fund 2 and Fund 3 and 4, just like University of Arizona and University of Utah did. Our goal is for this Fund 1 to get to 10 million private investment so we can maximize that match from the governor's office. We're about halfway to goal on our fundraise, about 2 months in or 2.5 months in. Most of the investors are local people that know me, that trust me, that have some affinity with the fund. They like the mission, they like helping the university, they want to help the city of Las Vegas. Our goal is, like my experience with Ventana Medical Systems, it's to grow companies like that here, that grow up and that stay here. Like that was the perfect exit, being bought by Roche and then left there in Tucson. That's what we're trying to do here. Help to grow great companies that stay here. They grow up and they stay, like Switch, and they stay and then they help to diversify the economy, build out and diversify the economy. State of Nevada, even though we're adding professional sports, all the stuff that we're adding so far in the gaming, hospitality, entertainment, and sports, it's all economically, it's all in the same vertical. And the trouble with that particular vertical around the fun economy is that when there are downturns in the economy, that hits Las Vegas hard, and then that hits the entire state hard. So that's why we continually do these boom and bust cycles in Nevada. So the goal is things outside of those sectors, in tech and biotech and other sectors, that help to diversify the economy, more recession resistant, and smoothens out and helps to grow and strengthen the economy here locally. We're looking for startups kind of at 3 different levels. Number one is kind of as something partnering with UNLV. So number one is anything interesting coming out of UNLV. We've committed to one company coming out based on UNLV technology. I'll talk about that in a minute, waiver. Level 2 is, and then anything else we see in the Las Vegas ecosystem. And there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. That we've got one that we've committed to that's out of UC Irvine that's incubating here. And then level 3 is that we've got partners around the world that have agreed to help us to recruit founders to come in and move startups into Las Vegas. So some of the examples of partners helping us is LG Nova, the innovation arm of LG, Intel Capital, Generators, a national accelerator that is headquartered in Wisconsin. InnoSource is a European accelerator, and many locally, the LVGEA is helping to do that recruitment as well. So we've sort of got three levels that we'll be sourcing or looking for founders and looking for startups. I've got a good team built. Christelle is one of them. She just came in as a recent UNLV grad from the Lee Business School, majored in finance, and participated in the Rebel Venture Fund. She ran the Financial Management Association, the chapter with the students. So she came to us just perfectly poised to do what she's doing. She's built out our due diligence process and our data locker, and is kind of jack of all trades for us, doing a lot of things. But those are her primary duties. So I got a good local team and a good group of about 18 or 19, 20 investors so far that have committed to the fund. Minimum investment into the fund, $200,000. So we've got investment so far from $200,000 to about $1 million in. And then our commitments out into startups, anywhere from $50,000 to about $500,000. The 2 companies I mentioned that we committed to, let me talk about them, and then this is the segue into founders, kind of what we're looking for. It doesn't necessarily have to be deep tech coming out of a university lab. The first 2 examples happen to be that way, but that's not necessarily the only thing we're looking at. But there are elements of this that I think are relevant for any founder. Waiver is the one coming out of UNLV. The technology is that it's harvesting water, atmospheric water harvesting, pulling water out of the air. Relatively easy to do in humid environments, difficult to do in desert climates and arid environments. The professor's Jeremy Cho in engineering, and that was the problem he and his students were trying to solve. They get the inspiration because one of the students says, well, what about the so-and-so, the frog in Australia and New Zealand, and also variants of the frog in Africa that can pull water in through the air, through their skin, and when times get hard, they can drink that way for a time. Their skin has qualities to sort of absorb water in. So they started experimenting with different kinds of membranes, and they discovered a gel membrane that works quite well doing that. And so their unit is a layer of these gel membranes. They use a saline solution that also helps to draw air through the membranes and collect water. So they pull air in, and it's running through all these membranes. They've got a little distillery connected to it, and water comes out the other end. They've got that, it's bench tested, work. They've got prototypes outside the building on campus that work. And the commitment we've made is $500,000 into waiver with GoEd, did their due diligence. They're matching at 500. And then their next sort of scale up and proving out the concept is then to choose an organization in town, perhaps one of the entities on the strip and one of the particular properties, and then use that money to then do a proof of concept on a larger scale over an entire property. In this case, even though it's potable, they want to just prove it out doing gray water for whatever organization they choose, fountains or whatever other water for washing they might do. Vina Vital, and that one, what I liked about that one too was the sort of professor slash scientist slash founders smartly chose a veteran to be their inaugural CEO, somebody with experience in sustainability tech. Rich Sloan, who's also a partner of ours with the fund, he's their inaugural CEO, and now kind of leading them out to get their start. Similarly, the other one out of my level 2, what else is going on in the Valley? We discovered that up at Roseman University, Roseman, if you remember, but they're in Henderson, big presence, probably their bigger campus by student body. But Roseman University Medical School, medical related degrees, they bought the old cancer center buildings. They're actually quite nice, and wet labs that have never really been used. Right up off the 215, kind of in South Summerlin. They bought those 3 buildings, and they're now operating a second campus up there. I didn't know it when I got back, but they're incubating biotech companies in those wet labs up there. I was totally shocked to find that out. One of them that really caught my eye was based at UC Irvine faculty. They were trying to solve the problem of how do you measure blood pressure when you're in surgery. If you're in surgery and it lasts 2-3 hours, you can't just have a cuff on, because that, for a variety of reasons, that won't work. And you need it to be continuous and accurate and not get in the way of whatever's going on in the surgery. So that's the problem. They got the inspiration from our watches, and the faculty at UC Irvine developed a membrane circuit that goes in a cuff that goes, the first instantiation is it goes around the ankle. It measures accurately, continuously, non-invasively. The state of the art right now is you go in surgery for 2 hours and they stick a needle in and that sits in there painfully and measures blood pressure throughout the surgery is the most typical. But it actually messes with the reading for a variety of reasons, whereas theirs does not. So the cuff then Bluetooths that to a dedicated iPad that sits in the OR and it's integrated with the other systems. What I liked about that was they also chose a grizzled veteran in the medical device industry, Ray Liu, who happens to live here, which is why it's incubating here in Las Vegas. And the other thing I liked was they bootstrapped like crazy with their own money and non-dilutive sources like grant funding and things to sort of stand this thing up. They've already done their own trials with over 500 patients, and before they get to the FDA, they wanted to do this stuff first and prove it out, and then we've committed $500,000. The governor's office, same thing, is matching. They'll use that money to now go through their FDA trials, but they've essentially already done the trials on their own. There are characteristics of both of those that we liked a lot, some of them that I've mentioned. So again, those two are examples of what you would call deep tech. It kind of discovery that came out of a lab, grant funded, like a lot of people, a lot of research going into the tech. That's not necessarily the only things we're looking for, though. We've got many other founders that we're talking to here in the Valley that have things that are not deep tech and not coming out of a lab with a lot of expensive money. And it's really all about the founders in those cases. It's not only a good idea, but there are characteristics of the founders that we like. Let me just mention a couple of them, and then I want to open it up for questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, whatever's on your mind. Some of the obvious things are, like, obviously we want to see that there's a founder market fit, that it's not only it's a good idea, but that this is the right person for that idea, either through their lived experiences or their training or their education or some problem that they've lived with or dealt with, that this is somebody that you look and you say, that is exactly the right person to be doing that. I can't think of anybody else in the world that ought to be doing that other than that person, that fit. That's an obvious one. Some of the other more obvious ones that there's sort of their mission driven to the point almost of obsession, not quite obsession, but almost obsessed, that they're driven to do this. This is absolutely the thing that they want to do. And that there's a grit and adaptability that when they deal with problems, and inevitably they're going to, that this is clearly somebody who's going to be able to get through that. The brick walls aren't going to mean much to them. They're going to go around them, over them, through them. It doesn't matter. They're going to find a way. And quite frankly, it's even better if they've already had problems and maybe a failure that they've gotten through, and they got that out of the way kind of before they get to us. But less obvious is that it's, there's something about that I can tell, when I meet with the founders, there's some of the founders there's an aura about them that they are going to attract. They're going to attract team members, they're going to attract money, they're going to attract partners, that there's something about the personality and the charisma, a lot of which you saw in Earl, that is naturally attractive. That helps. It doesn't have to be there, but man, it makes our job a lot easier. And then another one, not quite as obvious, is coachability. That it's somebody that they're obsessed and they're going for it, and they're not going to be driven or knocked off track on their mission, but that there's still adaptability and coachability there. I'll give you one quick example. A good friend of mine at University of Arizona, a faculty member, he and I had known each other all our lives. We were doctoral students together, and then both returning to University of Arizona. He and his graduate students started a company called NeuroID, and I won't get into all the specifics, but they did a really good job. They're based on keyboarding and mousing, and you're able to identify how people do that and to track that and make actions against that on what somebody's doing on their computer. That company did really well. It took a long time, but they sold to Experian last summer. It was a very good exit for my friend and his graduate students. But when that started, he's one of the smartest guys I know, and all those characteristics I just mentioned. But there's a little bit of ego there, and I think he'd be the first one to admit it. He started out as the founder CEO, but then to his credit, he checked his ego at the door because he needed to pivot. He pivoted to being the chief technology officer, and then the chief scientific officer, and then eventually went on the board, and then was chairman of the board for a year or two, and then ultimately just a board member at a later round, and then the exit. He made the pivots, and he adapted. He was coachable along the way, and that served him and that company really well, and they did well as a consequence. And then finally, what I would say is that we're not only looking for integrity and character, honesty, that it's somebody that we know we can trust and work with. That's been my experience in the past. But in this case, that it's somebody that there's a fit with our mission of trying to grow great companies here in Las Vegas, that there are people who care about this city and they want to be here. They don't want to be anywhere else. And they really want to grow this company and stay here for the long term and help us to build out an even better Las Vegas Valley than we have now. So that kind of fit is really important to us as well. Let me stop there and see if that's how I'm doing on time. Okay, 5 minutes. And just see if that prompts questions, comments. Yes, please.
How to apply?
So we're Desert Forge Ventures. We're easy to find on LinkedIn or on the web, desertforgeventures.com. And then for particular inquiries, you can send an email to me at Christel@desertforgeventures.com. Christel, Christel at desertforgeventures.com, because she's collecting up all the founder inquiries and investor inquiries, and then can start to put people through our process if they're interested for founders.
Should we send the pitch deck right away?
I would say just email her first, yeah, and then she'll follow through there with our check sheet. Yeah, yes?
Are you going to publish that report on the website?
It'll go public, yeah. It's the Lindsay Institute at UNLV. That they manage the Brookings, relationship at UNLV, the think tank on campus, and that'll go out publicly on the Lindsay website and on their socials, and all the social media stuff. And we'll have it on the Desert Forge socials. So the easiest place is to find us on LinkedIn, pretty easy, and then we'll put a link to the report there. Yeah. What else? Yes, please.
So you kind of mentioned in terms of some of the companies that you look at is like deep tech companies. Have you guys looked at any agriculture-based companies, as currently the food system supply chain is kind of not really resilient per se here in Nevada, more importantly here in Vegas. So have you looked at any agriculture-based companies?
We have, is the quick answer, and we're agnostic to the sector. It's more about the other characteristics that I described. So, and we have seen some really good ones around the region. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
So I was a founder when I moved out here.
Yeah,
Now gone, we've been acquired, so now back to being an employee.
yeah,
Pity me. I work in a $300 billion a year industry, computer games.
yeah,
Came out here, I had been in Michigan where I worked hand in glove with the Michigan Economic Development Council. Came out here and I found out that the state of Nevada, 7 years ago,
yeah,
was not interested in games.
yeah.
We kind of play them a lot here in Las Vegas. I'm just saying. They were interested in movies, which is the same thing, same debate that I've had in Michigan when I pointed out to them that we spend a lot of money to attract the film industry in the state of Nevada.
Yeah,
Where the film industry comes in for 6 to 8 weeks
right.
and then leaves. They're not staying here. They're going back to LA. Computer games take an average of 2 to 3 years to make. Why don't we invest in something that guarantees that people will be here for 2 to 3 years instead of 6 to 8 years?
Now, from a policy point of view, I totally agree with you. And that's why we'll look at gaming tech, and not gaming tech on the strip. I mean, but games and development of games. Absolutely. I mean, those are the kinds of things we want to attract.
Our latest financials editorial.
Yeah.
To acquire my company.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
up 60% year over year.
I'm not surprised.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, there's a lot of money in those games.
My kids are 22 and 27, and they're huge gamers still.
Tell them
Huge.
thank you, I need money.
Thank you, right, and the other pioneers who came here early and developed this ecosystem.
You
Yeah,
know, it's here. There's
Yeah.
an IGDA that's been active here. I've been on the board there on
Yeah.
the second go-around. International Games Developers Association. How many students are studying computer gaming
Yeah.
at UNLV? Let's find them jobs.
yeah. You know what I would say is that UNLV, the College of Engineering, we're probably getting to the end of our time, it's now the biggest and the fastest growing unit on campus, which is great. And that Dean Rama, is very open-minded in terms of tech transfer and keeping students local. And then lastly, Peter Tomasic, the UNLV grad, grizzled veteran, influential, that sold here. Now TensorWave, they just completed their $100 million A round here. It's a deep AI infrastructure company. Peter is working with Dean Rama, and they've created a program to take UNLV engineering students early and get them into internships and startups, so they can learn and kind of catch the fever and then want to stick around and work in these companies. Yeah, it's good, and it's good to see.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so let me ask a question for you. What stage of companies are you looking for? Like, what stage of development? Would you look at pre-revenue?
Absolutely. Given the size of the fund, where we're likely to end up, I mean, anything from inception through pre-seed, seed, small, Series A, probably with Fund 1, given how big we are in the economics of the fund. So yeah, we're willing to look at things pre-revenue. Yeah, yep.
Any more questions?
Yeah, and Christelle and I'll hang around for a little bit if people want to chat and have questions. Lorraine, thanks for having me.
No,
Yeah.
Len, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. Len, thank you so much.
Yeah,
We appreciate it. And listen, you want some of that money in Henderson, please. So
Yeah, Las Vegas Valley, it's the whole valley.